She was invisible to most people, just another overworked nursing student with oil on her hands and textbooks in her backpack. No one knew her name. No one noticed when she walked home with blisters on her heels or skipped dinner to pay rent. But on one rainy night, outside a glowing diner and under a broken street lamp, she saw a man collapse, and while everyone else froze, she moved. Her hands pressed against a stranger's chest as the seconds ticked away. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the man she saved would change everything. Not with applause, not with a headline, but with an envelope, a house key, and a question that would rewrite her future. Will you help me build something that outlives both of us? This isn't just a story about saving a life. It's a story about how showing up once, just once, can echo forever. You never know the moment your life is going to change. It's never marked, never scheduled, and almost always disguised as something ordinary. For Isla Torres, that moment came on a cold Wednesday night in front of a neon-lit diner, when a stranger collapsed on the sidewalk and nobody moved. Not a single person, not the couple eating fries behind the glass, not the guy with the earbuds staring at his phone, and not the cook who poked his head out the kitchen door and quickly retreated. Just silence and stillness. Except for Isla. She moved. She ran. And in the next 30 seconds, she performed CPR on a man she had never seen before and would likely never see again. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story. She only knew that if she didn't try, he might not have another breath. What she didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that this man would completely rewrite the course of her life before the week was over. And not with fame or news cameras or some viral clip, but with something quieter, more radical. Recognition. But first, we have to start with Isla herself. Because she wasn't just a hero in the right place at the right time. She was a young woman losing everything and helping anyway. Let's rewind. Isla Torres was 25, a nursing student 3 semesters deep into a mountain of student loans and a full-blown burnout spiral. She worked part-time at a tire and brake shop where the uniform smelled like rubber and the customers always assumed. She didn't know what torque meant. Between shifts, she studied emergency medical procedures in the backroom using a cracked tablet and a dollar store thermos of lukewarm coffee. Every exam was a trial, every shift a test, and every dollar mattered. That night, the night it all happened, she just passed her basic EMT certification. No party, no celebration, just a breath of relief and a promise to herself that she'd treat herself to a hot meal that didn't come in a vending machine bag. She walked into the little corner diner with $20 in her wallet and hope in her chest. But life, as always, had other plans. She saw him fall before she heard the thud. An older man in a charcoal coat, face gray, knees buckling as he crumpled outside the window like a marionette whose strings had been suddenly cut. The sound of his body hitting the pavement sliced through the casual buzz of the diner. But no. One moved. Isla did. Fork still in hand, she shoved open the door and bolted to his side, kneeling on the cold concrete. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, already reaching for his pulse. Nothing. Someone call 911. She shouted. Still no movement from the crowd. The moment was hers and only hers. Here's where instinct kicks in. and training. And something deeper, a refusal to be another frozen bystander. She tilted his head back, checked the airway, positioned. Her hands started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 30. Then 2 breaths. Again. 4 minutes passed like 4 hours. Sweat beating on her forehead, hands aching, breath shallow. Still no one came forward. Still no help. Until finally sirens, EMTs burst through the street, took over. Isla staggered back, heart pounding, unsure whether she'd helped or failed or simply witnessed something too big to understand. The man's chest finally rose on its own. His eyes fluttered. He mouthed something, "Thank you." Then he was gone. And Isla, she didn't even know his name, didn't ask, didn't think to. She walked home that night, not with triumph, but with an exhausted quiet. And the very next morning, life reminded her that doing the right thing doesn't always come with a parade. Her car was gone-towed, repossessed. An envelope taped to her door read, "Final notice. Rent overdue. Utilities cut." She sat on the front step of her apartment with the same hands that had brought a man back to life now curled around a shut-off notice. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "Why does trying to do good always feel like losing?" And that's where the story should have ended, right? With another burnt-out student, forgotten by the system she tried to contribute to, learning the hard lesson that kindness doesn't pay bills. But this story, this one, is different. Because someone was watching. Someone whose name carried more weight than money, and whose life, just 24 hours before, had been saved by a stranger in oil-stained jeans and a second-hand winter coat. Morning came like a wave of bad news. Isla opened her eyes not to sunlight or silence, but to the hard knock of reality. No power, no water, no car, no backup plan. The emergency CPR certification card still sat on her kitchen table, barely dry. From lamination, like a cruel trophy for a life she could no longer afford. That card was supposed to mean a step forward. Instead, it felt like a reminder of how far behind she still was. She pulled on the same clothes from the night before and walked 4 blocks to her job, trying not to feel the ache in her jaw or the throb in her chest down at the auto shop. No one knew what had happened. There was no mention of the man she saved. No surprise check in the mail. No article in the paper. Her coworkers just teased her for being late and asked why her hair looked like she'd slept in a wind tunnel. She smiled weakly, wiped brake dust from her palms, and kept her head down. For 8 hours, Isla worked through grinding noises and customer complaints, pretending her life wasn't crumbling one missed payment at a time. But something shifted that afternoon. It started with a phone call, unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to pick up. Miss Torres. The voice on the line was calm, professional, clipped. "This is Jennifer Marsh, calling on behalf of the property office for 122 Grove. We need to speak with you, immediately. I'm downstairs in your building." Isla's first thought, "They're here to kick me out in person." She bolted from the shop without clocking out, sprinting 3 blocks with anxiety tightening around her ribs. When she reached the lobby of her crumbling apartment building, she saw a sharply dressed woman holding a leather-bound folder and standing next to a man who looked suspiciously like a private security detail. "Miss Torres," the woman said, offering a hand. "You don't know me, but I'm here on behalf of someone you helped yesterday." "Someone who believes you saved his life." Isla froze. "You mean the man from the diner?" The woman nodded. "His name is Charles Whitaker." The name meant nothing to her, but the expression on the woman's face meant everything. Calm, serious, grateful, but not overly emotional. "He asked me to deliver something," Jennifer said, handing Isla an envelope. Inside, a typed letter, a key, and a single sentence handwritten in neat, elegant cursive. No one should lose sleep for doing the right thing. What followed didn't feel real. Jennifer explained that Charles Whitaker wasn't just a stranger, he was a multimillionaire, a banking executive with properties across the state, and a known but deeply private philanthropist. He had tracked down Isla within hours of being released from the hospital. "Mr. Whitaker has arranged to cover your lease termination," Jennifer continued. "He's purchased a modest home in your name and transferred ownership to you this morning." Isla blinked. "Wait, what? A home for me?" "Yes," Jennifer said. "And that's not all." She gestured toward the curb, where a gleaming charcoal gray sedan rolled into view. It was the exact model Ayla had cut out of a magazine 2 years ago and taped inside her notebook as a distant goal. "Your car was repossessed this morning," Jennifer said without blinking. "He bought the debt, paid it off, and replaced the vehicle." Isla felt the sidewalk sway, her knees locked. Her breath hitched. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered. I just did CPR. That's it." "That's not it," Jennifer said, stepping closer. "You did what no one else did. You moved. You acted. And Mr. Whitaker believes that shouldn't just be noticed, it should be honored. Let's pause here, because this moment right here, this is where everything flips. This isn't just a random act of charity. It's targeted, intentional, a deeply personal response to something no algorithm or checklist could have flagged. Charles Whitaker didn't just see a good deed. He saw courage. And he chose to reward it in the one way most people never get rewarded. Not with applause, but with real, tangible change. Jennifer handed Isla one more envelope. "Inside," she said, "is a letter from Charles himself. He wanted you to have it when you're ready. For now, I've been instructed to drive you to your new home, if you're willing." Isla didn't answer right away. How could she? Less than 24 hours ago, she was scraping together tips to pay for frozen dumplings. Now she was being offered a house and a fresh start. But then she thought about that moment on the sidewalk under the diner's flickering sign when she had no idea who the man was. When she just moved because no one else would. She nodded. "Okay, let's go." The ride to the new house felt unreal, like Isla had stepped onto the wrong movie set, except everything still smelled like brake fluid and hard decisions. Jennifer drove in silence, the leather interior cocooning Isla in an unfamiliar world of comfort. Her fingers gripped the envelope tightly, but she hadn't opened it yet. She didn't want to rush whatever came next. Not until she could stand still, breathe deep, and believe it was truly hers. The car turned off the main road, down a narrow street lined with sycamores and old brick homes. The kind of neighborhood Isla used to ride through on the bus, wondering what people behind those curtains felt like when they woke up, not worrying about rent or scraping together gas money, or ignoring the cold, because the heat bill was late. Then they stopped. Jennifer stepped out first. "Here we are," she said calmly. The house wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. A cozy single story with a stone path, a modest porch, and a small mailbox with her name already etched on the side. Isla stood frozen. "This is mine?" "It is," Jennifer said with a small smile. "He chose it himself." Said it reminded him of what mattered before everything got complicated. That struck Isla, because this wasn't about guilt. It wasn't charity. It was recognition, an unspoken way of saying, "I see you. I've been you." Inside, everything was staged but warm. Soft taupe walls, a lived-in couch, a kitchen stocked with basic groceries, a coffee mug that read, "Do no harm, but take no nonsense." Isla almost laughed. Then, finally alone, she sat on the edge of the bed. Yes, an actual bed, with clean sheets and no sag in the middle, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, hand-typed but signed in ink. It read, "Isla, you don't know me, and that's the beauty of this. You helped without knowing who I was, what I had, or what I could do for you. You moved when no one else did. You acted without cameras or recognition. That's rare. I've spent my life watching people freeze in fear or wait for someone else to move. But you didn't. I'm alive because of you. And I'm giving you this home, this car, and this start not because I owe you, but because I see you. You are what I once was, driven, tired, and trying not to break. And now you'll never have to break again. Don't doubt your worth, ever again. We'll speak soon." Charles Uyu Isla read the letter 3 times before she finally cried, not just from relief, not just from gratitude, but from something deeper, validation. The world had told her over and over that she was small, disposable, just another girl, trying to survive. But Charles had seen what the world missed, that someone fighting to stay afloat might still find the strength to save someone else. And this is where we stop pretending that small acts don't matter. Isla didn't invent a cure. She didn't win an award. She showed up. That's it. She put her hands on a stranger's chest and said, "Not today." And the ripple of that moment changed not only her future, but eventually countless others. Because what came next wasn't luxury. It was purpose. That night, Isla made herself real food. Not a frozen dinner, not instant noodles. Real pasta. A glass of wine. And she sat by the window, watching the quiet street, letting her body rest in a space that didn't demand explanation. No alarms, no roommates slamming doors, just her. A new key, a new address, a new identity forming not out of ego but from stability. And the next morning, it got even more surreal. She was brushing her teeth when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. She hesitated, then picked up. "Miss Torres?" The voice said, "Mr. Whitaker would like to speak with you, if you're open to it." She paused. "Now?" "No," the voice said. "In person. Tomorrow. He'd like to meet at the downtown medical center. He has something to offer, something long-term." Isla didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, but from anticipation, a buzzing current under her skin that no blanket could calm. She kept replaying the call, trying to decode the tone behind the message. Charles Whitaker wanted to meet her in person, at the downtown medical center. She had Googled him after she got off the phone, of course. And what she found was staggering. Not flashy headlines or scandalous exposes, no. Charles Whitaker had built one of the largest regional investment firms in the Midwest, quietly, methodically, with the kind of discipline that didn't chase limelight. He was a ghost in the media, but in finance and philanthropic circles, he was a whispered legend. Known for three things: discretion, decisive thinking, and generosity so private it bordered on myth. And she had performed CPR on him next to a cracked curb under a flickering sign, wearing grease-stained jeans and a fast food uniform. The next morning, Isla wore the cleanest outfit she owned, a pale blue button-up, fitted black pants, and flats she'd rescued from a thrift store bin last year. She arrived at the hospital 10 minutes early and sat in the lobby, staring at a painting of an open field on the wall. Then a nurse approached. "Miss Torres, he's waiting for you. Top floor." The elevator ride felt like an ascent into another version of her own life. When the doors opened, a tall woman in a gray suit met her and escorted her to a glass-walled room overlooking the city. Charles Whitaker sat there alive, alert, and unmistakably the same man she'd knelt beside just days earlier. The only difference now was the tailored blazer, the oxygen line still coiled at his side, and the quiet intensity in his eyes. "Miss Torres," he said, standing with effort but no hesitation, "I don't think 'thank you' is enough. But I'll say it anyway. Thank you." She stepped forward, still unsure of protocol in a situation that had no precedent. "You're welcome," she said quietly. I didn't know who you were. You just acted," he interrupted. "That's why I asked to meet you." They sat, no handlers, no cameras, just two people who had met at the most vulnerable possible moment in both their lives. And what followed was not a performance, but a proposal. Charles explained that over the past decade, he had funded multiple scholarships for medical students, but with limited personal involvement. "I wrote checks," he said, "but I never followed through, never mentored, never built anything with real structure. That changes now." He reached for a manila folder on the table. "I'm building a foundation, Miss Torres, for people like you, people who act when no one else will. It's going to fund training for EMTs, nurses, medics, and trauma responders. And I don't just want you to benefit from it. I want you to lead it." Isla's breath caught. "Lead it? But I'm still a student. I don't even have a degree yet." "Exactly," he said. "You're still close to the ground. You understand the pressure, the fear, the why behind, the work. That's what most of these foundations lose. The heartbeat." His voice softened. "I want you to be our heartbeat. Let's pause and look at what's happening here. Because this isn't just one rich man's attempt at philanthropy. This is legacy realigned." Charles didn't want to be remembered for buildings or dollar signs. He wanted to pour his second chance into creating first chances for others. And he saw in Isla not just a rescuer, but a leader. The kind of leader who didn't ask to be noticed, but acted anyway. Isla opened the folder. Inside, a stipend package, full tuition support, and a part-time salaried role at the foundation while she finished school. No catch, no contract to keep her indebted, just opportunity. "You changed my life," he said. "Now I want you to." help change others. She didn't cry, not there. But her voice cracked when she said yes. And when he reached across the table and shook her hand, she held on a second longer. Because she wasn't just agreeing to a job, she was accepting a new identity. One that said, you are not just enough, you are essential. The next week unfolded like a film directed by someone with a gentle hand and a long memory. Isla stepped into her new role with a strange mix of awe and fierce determination. The Charles Whitaker Foundation opened quietly, with no ribbon cutting, no red carpet, just a mission and a name. The goal was clear: identify people like Isla, underfunded, overlooked, but trained in courage, and give them what the world often refused to: resources, support, and belief. Isla's job at first was simple: help design the scholarship application process, sit in on strategy meetings, interview other young healthcare students. But quickly it became more. Charles included her in every major conversation. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the lens he filtered ideas through, and the more she spoke, the more people listened. Because Isla didn't talk like a fundraiser or a PR machine. She talked like someone who had lived every part of the struggle: burnout, fear, financial panic, emotional exhaustion. She was living proof that CPR training could be the hinge on which someone's entire life turned. Let's take a moment here to zoom in on something. In many stories like this, the transformation ends with the big check, the big reveal, the fantasy. But Isla's story continues through service. She didn't hoard the miracle. She multiplied it. She didn't vanish into a better life. She dragged others into it with her. And that's the difference between a moment of luck and a lifetime of meaning. 3 months into her role, Isla was on stage, yes. A stage with a microphone clipped to her collar and a slide deck behind her. She was presenting the foundation's launch to a room full of private donors, community organizers, and nursing students who looked like younger versions of her. She told them about the night outside the diner, about the man who fell, about the moment her hands shook but didn't stop. And then she told them this: you don't need a cape. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to move. Because someone's life might depend on your breath, your timing, your presence. And you may never know until afterward. The room gave her a standing ovation. Not because she was polished, but because she was true. And in the back row, Charles stood too, hands clasped, tears in his eyes. Not many people had ever seen him cry, but this wasn't sadness. It was pride. Weeks turned into months. Isla kept studying, kept working, kept growing. And one afternoon, Charles invited her to his home, not his estate, not his office, but a cottage near the edge of a lake, quiet and green, where he said he went when he wanted to remember who he really was. They sat on the porch drinking tea. Charles looked thinner, tired. His voice had a rasp to it, a softness. "I wanted you to see this place," he said. "It's where I made most of my decisions, the good ones, at least." Isla smiled. "And the questionable ones?" "Those too," he chuckled. Then he grew quiet. "There's something you should know," he said. "The day you saved me, I wasn't just collapsing from a heart attack. I was done. I hadn't told anyone, but I'd written a will. Closed my accounts. Told my staff not to schedule any meetings after that week. I didn't want to keep going." Isla's breath caught. "You were giving up," He nodded slowly. I was tired, empty. Success didn't mean anything anymore. Then, you showed up. You, this stranger, put her hands on my chest and said, without saying anything, "Not yet. You didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to stay in it." This was more than a thank you. This was a passing of the torch. Isla looked at him, this man who the world knew as powerful, untouchable, and saw the human beneath the legend. He wasn't a savior. He was a man who had been saved. And now his legacy wasn't in the buildings bearing his name. It was in the people Isla would lift after him. Time has a funny way of clarifying what matters. One day you're grasping at scraps of hope just to get through a shift, and the next you're being trusted with a vision meant to outlive the man who gave it to you. For Isla, that shift was no longer theoretical. It was real, palpable, and, in many ways, irreversible. The foundation was no longer just a project. It was her calling, and she knew it the moment Charles took her aside after a planning meeting and placed a sealed envelope in her hand. "I'm heading into surgery next week," he said gently. "Nothing urgent, just overdue maintenance. But if I don't come back out, I want you to have this." Isla's eyes searched his. "You're going to be fine. Probably," he said with a soft laugh. "But just in case, open it if you get a call from my lawyer." She never did. The surgery was successful. Charles recovered slowly but steadily. But something changed afterward, not in his body, but in his demeanor. He became even more reflective, as though he was measuring his days differently now. He invited Isla to more private dinners, more walks, more quiet chats where they spoke about purpose rather than performance. And one evening, as they watched the sun set over the garden outside the Foundation's new office, he said, "What we're doing here is going to outlast me. That's the point. But what I want to know is, will you carry it beyond what I imagined?" Isla didn't answer right away, because that's the kind of question that sinks into your bones. "If I try," she said finally, "it won't be out of obligation. It'll be because I believe in what you believed in." He nodded. That was enough. Over the next year, Isla graduated nursing school at the top of her class. She passed her licensing exams, walked the stage in a navy blue gown, and received a standing ovation from an audience full of scholarship recipients wearing pins that bore her initials. IT, not for technology, not for trend, but for tenacity. For the girl who knelt beside a dying man and said, through action alone, "You matter." She started working part-time at a trauma ward, not because she needed the hours, but because she needed the connection. She didn't want to lose the spark that had started everything. She wanted to keep her hands in the real world, even as she helped build bridges behind the scenes. The Foundation expanded. By the end of its second year, they had granted over 300 full scholarships to emergency medical trainees. They had partnerships with hospitals, clinics, and community programs. And at the center of it all was Isla, still walking into the office with the same thrift store flats, though now repaired with real solace. Still writing notes on recycled paper. Still remembering every recipient by name. Then came the call. It was late evening. Isla was just stepping out of the hospital after a long shift. Her phone buzzed. It was Charles's assistant. "He wants to see you, now, at his home." She rushed there, heart pounding not with fear, but with urgency. Something was ending. She could feel it. Charles was in a recliner, wrapped in a quilt, his breathing slower now, his frame smaller. But his eyes lit up when she entered. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, kneeling beside him just like she had the first time they met, but this time in peace, not panic. He reached out and placed something in her hand, a pin, gold, with a small engraving on the back. "Every breath matters." "You're ready," he said. "You've always been ready. You just needed someone to say it." Then he looked her in the eyes and smiled. "Promise me something." "Anything," she whispered. "Promise me you'll never doubt what you did. Not for 1 second. Not just what you did for me. But for yourself. For every person who breathes today because you moved." She nodded, too choked up to speak. He closed his eyes. "That's all I needed to hear." He passed in his sleep 2 nights later, peacefully, without pain, with his legacy not tucked away in trust funds or glass towers, but walking out the door each morning wearing stethoscopes and scrubs, and confidence stitched together from scholarships and second chances. At the funeral, Isla spoke last. She didn't read from a script. She didn't rehearse. She stood before a packed chapel and said, "Charles taught me that generosity is not just giving money, it's giving meaning. He didn't rescue me, he reminded me I was never helpless. And through that reminder, he gave me a voice. And she has never stopped using it since." The world didn't shift all at once after Charles Whitaker's funeral, but something quieter did. The next morning, the foundation staff came in early. They didn't speak much, just moved with purpose. Isla unlocked the doors herself, flipped the lights on, and walked into his office, not to mourn, but to carry. She sat in his chair, not out of pride, but responsibility. And there, beneath the low hum of early sunlight hitting the glass, she whispered what had become her mantra: "Every breath matters." The phrase wasn't just etched into the gold pin Charles had given her. It had become a pulse at the center of everything they built. And now it was her job to make sure that pulse didn't fade. She didn't change overnight. She still missed bus stops when she read too much, still burned toast in her new kitchen, still sat on her porch at dusk sipping the same discount tea she always had. But the difference now was how others saw her and how she finally saw herself. She was no longer just the girl from the alley. She was the woman who turned an emergency into an institution. She had grown into a role she never sought but now carried with strength. Let's talk about impact. In the 3 years that followed Charles's passing, the foundation went national. Thousands of scholarships, mobile trauma units in underserved towns, CPR training in high schools, emergency response kits handed out like pencils in classrooms. Isla didn't need to be the face of it. She didn't pose for glossy magazine covers. She led with grit, with late-night policy calls, with handwritten notes to applicants, with tears when she read stories from recipients who wrote, "I was ready to quit until I found your name," because her name had become shorthand for what mattered, for choosing action over hesitation, compassion over comfort, courage over convenience. And then one rainy spring afternoon, something came full circle. She was walking through the EA when a nurse pulled her aside. "Someone's asking for you," she said. "He says you saved his granddaughter's life." Isla blinked. I did? With one of your students, the nurse clarified. The young girl who performed CPR outside the library last night. She was wearing your foundation's pin. Isla stepped into the room, and there, sitting by the bed, was a girl no older than 20, trembling but smiling through tears, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. And beside her, the elderly man who stood, eyes wide with recognition. "You're Isla," he said. "They said she got her training through your program, that she knew what to do, that she didn't freeze." Isla walked over, took the girl's hand in hers. "You moved," she whispered. "That's all it takes. Because that's the lesson. It's not about grand heroics. It's not about timing, luck, or being seen. It's about that second when you decide to step forward instead of back. The second where you take your fear and turn it into movement. That's what Isla did. That's what the girl in the library did. That's what you can do. Maybe you'll never give CPR. Maybe you'll never start a foundation. But maybe, one day, you'll see someone who needs help, and instead of looking around, you'll step forward. Not because you have to, but because you can. Because the quiet truth this story teaches is this: the world doesn't need more people waiting to be told they matter. It needs more people like Isla who remind others they do. And if Charles Whitaker were here to say one final thing, I think it would be this: don't underestimate a breath, or the person who's willing to give it. Asterisk, you don't need a title, a fortune, or a crowd of witnesses to change the world. You just need to show up when no one else moves. That's how legacies begin. That's how lives are saved. That's how one moment turns into something eternal.